Johannesburg. I am pleased to say there are no snow today. On behalf of Proudly South African, we welcome you, warmly welcome you to our webinar entitled The Power of Local Manufacturing. And all of this is obviously about fostering important economic growth in South Africa. This webinar aims to spark, I hope, some crucial insights, some conversation about the significance and importance of local manufacturing in shaping our country's economic destiny. I'm so delighted to be hosting this again. My name is Jeremy Maggs. Let me just give you a line or two on context here, if I can, before I introduce you to our panel members and also to our Chief Executive Officer. We strongly believe that South Africa's path to economic prosperity lies in harnessing our local manufacturing capability. There is absolutely no doubt that we have the skills, we have the talent, we have the wherewithal, the will to do it all. We know how to foster innovation in South Africa, but it's all about promoting sustainable growth. And by doing that, it's also about empowering local communities. And I hope today, by discussing these issues, we can contribute to a broader and more collective understanding of how we can fortify our local manufacturing sector and the critical role that it plays in growing South Africa's economy. I'm going to introduce you to three people who are really at the nexus of all of this, and then I am going to lead a conversation. Throughout the process, everybody, I will keep a very close eye on questions coming in, and I will act as a conduit as far as that is concerned. I'm going to pull into the conversation in just a moment Eustace Mashimba, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Proudly South African. He'll talk a little bit about the ongoing campaigns and also the mandate. Then I'll introduce you to Rene Muthilal, who is Executive Director of NACAM, focusing on the automotive industry in South Africa, along with Tapiwe Samanga, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Production Technologies Association of South Africa, and also from SBS Tanks, Chester Foster will also join the conversation. And I hope it is interesting, and I hope that it is stimulating. I certainly have a lot on my list of questions to ask everybody. But Eustace, why don't you kick us off if you can? Let's hear from you. Let's get the broad context and tell us why it's so important that we've got to focus on local manufacturing. I think while we're doing that, I'm going to ask our other guests just to go off camera. So Eustace, we can focus exclusively on you. I'll go off camera as well. The moment you've finished your presentation, I'll come back and we can go to our panel as well. Hopefully a little bit later on in the show, we will have a representative from DTIC. We are hoping to set that up as well. But Eustace, in the meanwhile, I see that you are certainly dressed for cold weather today and in a proudly South African way. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for the virtual floor. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Good morning to all our attendees, our delegates, fellow panelists. Thank you for gracing us with your presence this morning, very cold morning. We hope you will find this informative and insightful. I have a few slides to take you through and basically to give you a sense of what this Proudly South African campaign is about and just give you a sense of what we are up to, especially in the context of the conversation that is being had this morning. We're a buy local campaign, and we are formed on the back of the fact that the country battles three main challenges. And even back then, when this campaign was formed, it was as a result of the country going through the same challenges, and the main one being unemployment. And today we're talking about manufacturing, very labor-intensive industry. And I'm going to take you through a quick case study showing you the impact of supporting a labor-intensive industry, so that you understand, the importance of choosing locally made products in line with what we stand for as Proudly South African. Quick numbers, statistics in terms of unemployment, very high levels of unemployment. If you look at the expanded definition of unemployment, we're sitting at 42.4%. So just below half of everyone who's eligible to work in this country is unemployed, including those who are discouraged, 3.4 million of them, and there's about 7.9 million of those who are looking for work, actively looking for work, who can't find and access employment opportunities. And the most affected remains, the youth and women, especially Black African women. And this is in the context of a country with about, 60 million odd people or thereabout. And if you compare us with an economy like China, where there's about 1.4, 1.5 billion people living in that country, but the unemployment levels always hover between 4 to 5%. In fact, I saw that there was, a lot of media attention given to the fact that the unemployment levels had reached for the first time 5.5%. So, and it was largely the youth who were affected, and there was a lot of noise. So it just shows you that we are far out in terms of where we need to be. As promised, a quick case study showcasing the impact of imports on a labor-intensive industry, which is part of the broader manufacturing sector. So I've zoomed into one in the interest of time. Furniture industry. I have multiple case studies, including on clothing and textile, automotive. But for today, I'll just focus on the furniture industry. And if you look at the capacity we had in the country, we had 3,500 factories producing furniture in South Africa, reduced to 1,100 factories just within a 20-year period. And all of that capacity has been lost, and that infrastructure that we have lost as a result, we will never be able to get back, and that is the downside of it. If you look at jobs, actual jobs lost directly, 50,000 jobs we had, and we've lost half of those within that 20-year period. We only had 25,000 in 2020, and those are just the direct jobs. If you look at indirect jobs, you have, in terms of the multiplier effect, other industries affected by our decisions to import furniture. So because if you think about a furniture item, you need raw materials and components, and these come from all of these industries. So we will need synthetic fibers from the plastic industry to make furniture. The textiles and leather industry contributes raw materials that are utilized by furniture manufacturers, but even they require natural fibers, hides, and skins that come from the agricultural industry. The metal parts that are utilized come from the metal industry. The chemical sector provides us with glues and adhesives and paints that we utilize to manufacture furniture. And so all of those indirectly are affected. Jobs are lost in all of those industries outside of the 25,000 direct jobs that I spoke about. So our mandate is quite simple: ensure that industries like that are supported, such that jobs that have been created in those industries can be retained. And as a result of our buying decisions, choosing to buy from those manufacturers, and they also choosing to buy locally as part of what they require to make those items, we will be able to then create much needed new job opportunities. And so the role of Policy of Care is centered around ensuring that anyone who makes a purchasing decision is influenced to choose local. And this concept of buying local is not unique to South Africa. It's a global phenomenon. It's tried and tested all over the world, very successful in most economies. The model that Policy South Africa adopted when we first opened our doors in 2001 came from Australia. The Australian-made campaign is one of the most successful buy local campaigns in the world. A quick case study for this morning is the United States. As part of their macroeconomic policy, they have, localization. And they even established an act, the Buy American Act in 1933, followed that up with the Buy America Act in 1982, and issued an improvement to that act in 2017. And even the current president, within the first week of coming into office, signed Buy American provisions into law when he first addressed both houses, the joint houses, both Congress and Senate, during April 2021 after his election. He confirmed their focus on local procurement and buying local as a government. And so it's not unique to South Africa, because the benefits, as you see them on the screen, refers to the ability for us to can retain jobs and create much needed new job opportunities. As you can see, the entrepreneurs on the screen, they're happy that they were able to open their businesses and that you are buying from them. You can run the best business in the world, but if no one buys from you, it defeats the purpose. And so as we continue to buy from entrepreneurs like this, who provide services or who manufacture products locally, we are giving them an opportunity to create much needed new job opportunities over and above retaining existing jobs. The people that they employ, I spoke about the fact that predominantly the most affected in terms of our unemployment numbers are the youth and women, and they will be able to acquire skills. Those young people who are roaming the streets of our country will be able to acquire skills as they're absorbed into job opportunities. It will contribute to the development of the economy. It will help with the empowerment agenda that we still have to drive as a new entrant. If you come into any industry, if you start manufacturing anything, knowing that there's a localization drive, in the country, that there's a deliberate attempt to buy from those who produce locally. If you produce or manufacture a product locally, you will know that you will get supported. And so these agenda really will help us with supporting new entrants and transformed entities. It will improve the living standards of both the entrepreneurs as well as those who then ultimately get employment opportunities in those companies, and it will contribute to the increasing the GDP of the country. And so our focus area as Proudly South African is around what is bought by the public sector, what is bought by the private sector. We also seek to educate the public on the importance of buying local. And lastly, we promote accessibility of locally made products and services. So all of these sectors, whether it's the public sector, the private sector, or members of the general public who choose to buy locally made products, need to know how to access these products. And that is our role as Proudly South African, to make them easily accessible. And so every time you come across the logo of Proudly South African, you know that it represents these 4 key criteria. The first one being that the product itself is made in South Africa. If you look at the Proudly South African logo, as you see it on the screen, it's made up of the colors of the flag, the national flag of the Republic of South Africa, similar to my scarf, coincidentally, telling you instantly that the product is made in South Africa, that the raw materials and components that were utilized to make that product, as best as possible, if they're available in the country, they are sourced in South Africa. And also, what we provide for is instances where we know that companies sometimes require raw materials and components that are not necessarily available in the country. We do allow our members to bring those in, but the transformation of those, the value addition of those raw materials must happen within the borders of South Africa so that jobs are created ultimately. The second criteria that we look at is quality. Whether you are manufacturing a product or you're rendering a service, you need to ensure that you adhere to the standards set out for that industry. You're going to hear from panelists representing different industries, and the industries they come from all have regulations stipulating the standards which they must comply with and adhere to. And that is what we look at. We don't want to say South Africans, they must buy local when the quality is not at the required level. We also have 2 softer criteria, but which are also important, in that companies that affiliate with us have to help us reduce the carbon footprint. There's this decarbonization drive that we are seeing in many industries, and so our members are actively participating in those, ensuring that they reuse material and recycle where possible, dispose of waste responsibly, and just ensure that they deploy environmentally sound practices in their businesses. They also then have to ensure, as members of Proudly South African, that they treat their workers fairly and in accordance with the labor legislation of the country. So if you think of the business support ecosystem, whether you're talking SMMEs or big business, you need access to all of this funding, compliance mechanisms, for non-financial support. You need to be able to register your IP and your trademark. You need access to information to help you with whatever challenges you might be having. But most importantly for us, and this is where Proudly South African sits, it's about access to markets. And like I mentioned earlier, whether you have a new product that you're taking to market, you are a new entrant, you're a transformed entity, the role of localization is to ensure that as long as you have a product or service that comes from within the borders of South Africa, we can help you access markets that you intend your product to reach. And so I'm going to quickly take you through the access to market programs that we have before I wrap up. And so we've sort of segmented it. I mean, we have companies that are affiliated with us who want to ideally sell their products on online platforms. And so we have formed partnership with e-commerce partners. This includes the likes of Zulzi, Macro Marketplace, One Day Only, Made by Artisans, Loot, and we have many more. I've just listed a few on that slide. And what we have negotiated with these guys is that they then allow our members to sell their products on the platform, and we carry the cost, as opposed to you as an entrepreneur, as a manufacturer, having to carry the cost yourself. As one of the benefits you derive from us is that you are able to sell on those platforms. Whilst we work on our own platform, which we anticipate as going live with from the 1st of November, we want our members to be able to sell on online platforms, and that is for those with consumer-facing products. For those with business targeted products, we also have a partnership with BizMed, and BizMed basically sells medical related products that are targeted at businesses. So whether they're targeting clinics, hospitals, or anything that is medical related that you are manufacturing and you want to take to the market, you can sell through BizMed. and they will be able to give you that support that you require as part of the partnership that they have with us. And these are just examples of what we do from an e-commerce perspective. In terms of the private sector, we go out, we look for commitments, and we ask the private sector to give us an indication of items that they want to buy locally. We have created portals where buyers can find sellers. We have a portal called MAP. On MAP, we list all our members, so all manufacturers and service providers of Proudly South African are listed on MAP. And on the opposite side, all the buyers list themselves, and that is where they then utilize MAP to find locally made products. So as a member of Proudly South African, you will be registered on MAP at no additional cost. As we go to a bank, to a hospital, to an independent school, and we ask them to give us a commitment to buy local, as they agree to buy local, they will then be in a position to can easily find you through that portal, because the buyers will utilize it to search for suppliers, and they can even search for women-owned companies, for Black-owned companies, and depending on what their procurement goals are, this portal will help them. We take our members to expos and markets. In fact, this week, wine manufacturers, who are affiliated with us, will participate in an expo running from Thursday the 13th to Saturday the 15th, and the start of that expo on Thursday includes a buyer session where we have buyers from hotels, restaurants, retailers, liquor outlets, who are in a position to can give shelf space to manufacturers, especially the smaller, lesser known wine brands, but it's made in South Africa. They also need access to markets. And that's what we do. We curate our own expo platforms, but we also find markets and other expos where we buy the space and our members can go and exhibit and showcase their products. We also lobby retail industry bodies and associations, as well as actual retailers, to give shelf space to members. When it comes to the public sector, for those of you who are intent to doing business with government, we have integrated our database with the central supply database of government. If you want to do business with government, you have to be registered on the CSD as their central supply database. And so we have now integrated our both systems. As a member of Proudly South African, if there's a box that you tick when you join, if you indicate that you want to do business with government, we list you on there. We have a tender monitoring system that enables us to track tenders for items that we know can be made in South Africa because government had previously designated them for local procurement. We then send all of those tenders to our members for them to be able to respond to those tenders. But alongside that process, we engage the departments or municipalities or state-owned companies to ask them to ensure that the tenders are awarded to local companies. There's a lot of lobbying and bidding that happens behind the scenes for the benefit of local manufacturers. SOUP is a state-owned enterprises procurement forum where we engage with all heads of procurement in state-owned companies to get them to choose locally made products. The question that comes up a lot, Jeremy, is how much does it cost to be a member of Proudly South African, to participate in all of these programs that we have? I mean, I've just touched on just a few of them. There's quite a lot in terms of our bouquet of offerings when you look at our value proposition. The membership is not expensive. It's an investment worth making for your business. If your turnover is less than 5 million rands, all you need to pay us is 500 rands per annum. If your turnover per annum is between 5 million and 10 million is 1,000 rands, and between 10 million and 30 million is 10,000 rands, and the most that any company that wants to affiliate with us ever has to pay is 100,000 rands for membership, and that is for companies with turnovers of 100 million rands and more. So it's really not expensive if you look at the kind of benefits that we make available to our members. I want to quickly touch on a new campaign. We've come up with a new campaign. One of my earlier slides pointed to the fact that we educate consumers on the importance of buying local. We have to get every single South African to understand that when they buy a product that comes from China, if the country of origin label that is on that product says made in Taiwan, you have effectively created jobs in Taiwan. And so to take it a step further, we've come up with a campaign and we call it Second Half. And Second Half basically says, before COVID, we're in the first half of where we need to be as an economy. We did not do well. Even before the COVID pandemic hit us, we're not doing well. And so it's an opportunity now, as the economy has fully opened up again, for us to do things differently, to ensure that the economy that we have is strong enough such that we have confidence that when we pass it on to the next generation, they will be secured because there will be jobs, there will be equal opportunity for everyone to start, enterprises to manufacture products locally, knowing that this market that exists within the borders of South Africa, is available for them to take advantage of. Let me quickly play the campaign, and then I will then wrap up.
There's a voice that is calling, loudly calling, day by day, the voice of the future.
When I started my business, all I wanted was to create jobs and a legacy for the next generation, because I see opportunity when others see impossibility.
It all started with a thought and then a seed in the garden, which grew into my very own farm that feeds the whole nation daily.
Cotton, silk, and a little bit of treasure, I create masterpieces that give South Africans an identity, comfort, and confidence, because when you look good, you feel good.
From the factory workers to the warehouse and then over the seas, I want to show the world what proudly South African looks like. It all started with just some ink on paper and inspiration to bring people together. With my furniture, I now help create spaces that are beautiful, comfortable, and authentic to human light and connection.
I've always been driven by curiosity. It fueled my dreams to create automobiles that accelerate our nation into greater possibilities and the beauty of the unknown.
I was born into a rainbow nation. My life has been full of colors and mixed flavors. And when I started my bakery, I wanted to share that joy with the world and with South Africans in particular.
All I ever dreamt of was to be a bird and fly high. And now I have the wings to help others fulfill their dreams of flying high too.
But it can only be a dream until you make it a reality. All they need is your faith, your trust, your loyalty, your appreciation.
And most importantly,
Your support
because supporting local businesses
Helps create jobs
and secures our future.
South Africa, their future is in your hands. So what are you going to do about it? Be proudly South African. Buy local to create jobs.
And that's the new ad that underpins our new campaign. It's about ensuring that all South Africans understand the role that they can play in not just only creating jobs during this period, but ensuring that this economy can be sustained going forward. So what are you going to do about it? Like the narrator in the advert says, choose locally made products. Second half is really in your hands, Mzansi. I appreciate the time that has been given to me, Jeremy. For anyone who wants to engage with us, contact us via email info@proudlysa.co.za, 011 327 778 is how you can get hold of us. And we are available to help you take up membership, to help you, with access to market opportunities as best as we can as a company that produces your products locally or renders services locally, because there's always that question around whether services are included or not. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time given to me.
Eustace Mashimbe, thank you very much indeed, the Chief Executive Officer of Proudly South African. Let me reintroduce our panel members to you as we get started with a discussion. If I could ask our three panel members to put their cameras on, and in no particular order, Rene Mutilal, who is the Executive Director of the National Association of Automobile Component and Allied Manufacturers, along with Tapiwe Samanga, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Production Technologies Association of South Africa. And you can also see Chester Foster from SBS Tanks. He is the Managing Director, and I'm also delighted to see on my screen that we've been joined by Susan Mankhole, who's the Acting Deputy Director General, Industrial Financing Branch at the DTIC. To all of you, a very warm welcome. So let's start the conversation if we can. And Rene, let me come to you first of all. Your key focus obviously is the automotive industry in South Africa. How important is local manufacturing within your paradigm? But perhaps more importantly, where are the problems, where are the issues that are presenting themselves, and how are you dealing with them?
Thanks, Jeremy, greetings, Eustace, my fellow panelists, and all of those who've joined this morning. Maybe just allow me to very quickly introduce my organization for those who are not familiar with NOCAM. We are the Industry Association for Auto Component Manufacturers, and we play a very strong role in terms of representation, stakeholder engagement, leadership of positions that are typically looking to promote the wider South African autos manufacturing sector, but of course, more importantly for our constituency, it is the component manufacturing value chain. And I think that's really important because the topic of today's discussion is probably at the heart of, I think, why lots of people look at the automotive sector as a driver of industrialization and a driver of many of the kind of economic development or growth impacts that we as South Africans want to see. I think the component manufacturing sector is where a lot of the employment opportunities, transformation opportunities, skills, technology development, it all resides within the value chain or the component producing part of autos manufacturing. I think those who are familiar with the sector will know that autos production in South Africa has a long history. It's equally got a long history of being supported by policy and various government incentive programs. And it's good to see Susan on the call. I'm sure she'll probably touch on wider government support. By and large, I think to your direct question, I think localization is at the heart of why we support and why we have autos manufacturing in South Africa. A sector that has probably, let's talk in the post-democratic period in South Africa, contributed anything between just under 5 at the moment, but let's just say 5 to 7% of the country's GDP for a single manufacturing sector. When you consider that South Africa has had strong dominance in agriculture, resource, financial services, says exactly what localization or local production is all about. My own organization subscribes to supporting localization from the perspective of ensuring that the multitude of component companies in South Africa find a way of getting as much opportunities to supply into the vehicle assembly plants in South Africa, but importantly, to find their own kind of bases or unlocking localization opportunities across our own kind of, let's call it the tier one or immediate direct suppliers to the OEMs. So in as much as NOCAM as an organization subscribes to the long-term industrialization plans for the auto sector covered by what we know as the SA Autos Master Plan up to 2035. The majority of our activities that we undertake, other than the advocacy and regulatory type work, is to help companies in this space find ways to make themselves more competitive, and in doing so, provide a base for greater localization. Like I said, that is effectively what unlocks the kind of wider economic spill-off in I think probably the premier example of a global manufacturing value chain. So at a high level, I think that's why localization is so important in an auto sector context, and I'm quite happy to get into further detail as we go.
Rene, thank you very much indeed. We will get to that. There are two important issues that you've raised. One is getting into the supply chain and making sure that you unlock solutions. And the other one, and you've raised this twice already in your opening remarks, is the importance of staying competitive. And I'm going to delve into that in just a moment. Susan, I'm so glad that you are with us, and thank you very much indeed. So from the DTIC, Acting Deputy Director General, the Industrial Financing Branch, and maybe just give us a sense to Rene's point as well about the financing programs and the offerings that are available. what the take-up is like and how difficult it is to access those programs, because we all know that local business is important, but unless you have the money to actually be in business, you're not even on the playing field. You're still in the dressing room.
Good morning, Jeremy, and good morning to my fellow panelists. Thank you so much, and also to the attendees that are online. It's an honor to be here, and thanks, Renee, for giving that introduction. From the DTIC's point, we've got a package of industrial financing support that we offer as either a grant, a loan, or a tax allowance that is available for manufacturers. So what Renee has touched on is the importance of South African businesses to be part of the supply value chain of the OEMs. So obviously what it means is that we support companies with machinery and equipment. We support them with working capital to service those orders. So to the question that you then asked, to say the support that we offer for manufacturing, the very first one is the automotive investment scheme, so that Renee referred to. So under the automotive incentive scheme, you qualify for a grant. Then we also have the agro-processing. The CEO of Proudly South African touched on the issue of buying local. The agro-processing, the main objective is to make sure that the farmers, the local farmers in South Africa, they add value to their crops to be able to sell to the South African. Then again, under that, we're also making sure that because obviously when you do farming, for you to be able to access markets, you have to meet certain standards. You get funding for machinery and equipment. You also get funding to be able to meet those quality standards. That, Jeremy, assists South Africa to create jobs and also to make sure that when we say we buy local, we also buy the crops that are grown at home, that are also processed at home. The next one is the Aquaculture Development Enhancement Program that is mainly for food security and also to assist the small holding farmers of fish to make sure that they actually process their goods. This type of support, we offer it in partnership with the Industrial Development Corporation, which mainly provides support as loans and which also assist with also some part of the grant. Then we also have the National Empowerment Fund. We have these partnership funds that we are administering with them. For example, during COVID, we had the COVID distress facility with both the two institutions to assist South African manufacturers to be able to undertake their manufacturing activities, looking at the opportunities that COVID presented. Then also at a later stage, we also have the flood relief. The main one of the flood relief was to make sure that we assist companies, mainly with manufacturing and as well as the other sectors, to make sure that they come back and they are back, they survive, they're able to rebuild. The very last one is the Energy Support Fund, where we assist manufacturers to be able to be open during the days of the load shedding. You mentioned something to say how difficult it is to actually access the funding. And I'm going to come back to what Renee touched on and what the CEO of Proudly South African touched on. The support that we offer, it's in grant and loan. You have to be a registered company to be able to access the incentive. You also have to be in compliance with SARS. The key there is that when you, like for instance, I'll give an example with agro-processing. Let's say you are growing cabbage, you need to package cabbage for Spar. You will need to have an off-take agreement with one of the big retailers. And I think that brings us back to the issue of buying local. A lot of companies that we support with machinery and equipment and working capital, they struggle to get their product being bought by South African. And I think this type of initiative, Jeremy, they actually assist, because now we are saying to South African to say, consume South African goods, buy South African goods in such a way that you keep the very same manufacturers that we supported in business. So Jeremy, let me pause there. Thank you so much.
Susan, thank you very much indeed. I do want to come back to the whole issue of financing in a moment, particularly around the kind of due diligence that you would do in order for people to procure those grants or those loans. But again, let's get to some of our other panel members. Tapiwa Samanga, the Production Technologies Association of South Africa. Very quickly, give us a sense of what you do, how you can help local manufacturers in pursuing their goals, and particularly the focus on skills development. It's something we hear about all the time within the South African economic context. But what are you doing in order to enhance that process? Because without the right people doing the jobs, it has an impact on quality, which is going to have an impact on competitiveness.
Thank you, Jeremy. I acknowledge the other panelists. Two of them, about 10 years ago, we used to work within 20 meters of each other, dealing with this localization thing. And I know it's something that personally we are all passionate about. And also to acknowledge the viewers online. We are the Production Technologies Association of South Africa. We represent the interest of what we call the tool, die, mold, and special machining industries. Generally, we say what we do is tooling. It's a subject that is a bit hidden to a lot of South Africans, not only South Africa, but around the world. It's only in countries which have put a focus on it that it is quite clear. So tooling is at the core of manufacturing. No country can aspire to have a viable manufacturing sector without focusing on tooling. Simply put, we make the things that make things. So whatever you are seeing, if you go 2-3 steps behind, that's where we are. So if we are to have a very solid and growing manufacturing sector in South Africa, we need to focus on tooling. Research has actually shown that 60% of the cost of a product is actually dependent on the tooling decision that you make. So that's where we are. What we do as an association, we promote the interests, of course, of the members, of our members, which are in the tool, die, mold, and special machining sector, but also as programs, and that's probably what is key to localization. We've got 2 key programs that we run. We train tool makers, which means we actually develop the skills that make things in the country. Presently, we've got 4 training centers in the country, one in Gauteng, one in Cape Town, one in Quebec, and one in KZN in Pietermaritzburg. We have a second program which actually focuses on developing and upgrading the competitiveness of companies that are in the tool, die, mold, and special machining sectors. 50% of our market by value is actually in the automotive sector. So we support the automotive sector in skills and also the companies that we train. We've been training for 14 years now. And I will later will probably go into what we have done over the past 14 years. But what we do now, if you go into any of the assembly plants now for OEMs, for your Mercedes-Benz, your Ford, you will see our graduates. If you are driving a locally assembled car, it has been touched by our people. That's how far we have gone over the past 10 years. We work very closely with NACAM. 75% of our funding has come from the DTI. We've got a very special relationship with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. They have understood this and they've actually supported us for the past 13 years. And 25% have actually come from from industry. I think I'll end there for now, but the key message is without tooling, we are not going anywhere. There are other key skills as well, but tooling is at the center of that. Thank you, Jeremy.
Tapiwa, thank you very much indeed. And when I get into my car to drive home a little later today, and I know that my vehicle is locally manufactured, I will be thinking of you and all the people that have touched that vehicle. So thank you very much indeed.
It's safe. And it's safe.
And that it's safe. Chester, a very warm welcome to you. And I think that everybody who's on this webinar today can see exactly what it is that you do, because you are sitting in front of a big backdrop. So my question to you is, just give me a little sense of SBS tax, but I want you to reflect as well on the importance of local manufacturing and perhaps how difficult it is to get into the supply chain in an industry, I imagine, that might be fairly competitive. So what are the obstacles then that you have to overcome?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Amy, and acknowledgement to all the panelists. Nice to meet you all. I think firstly, it's a tough industry. I think there's been a lot of competitors that have come in, but firstly, we were one of the first members of Proudly South African through our CEO, Delane Gray, who I think we were in the top 10 first signups for. So we've been with Proudly South African right from the beginning, and even though it was a externally IP product, we manufacture it proudly in Westmead and Pinetown and export all over the world. We export to 27 countries around the world. I think when it was 2013, we won Exporter of the Year with Proudly South Africa. So we've been entrenched, and we believe in manufacturing and all the things that we've spoken about that our panelists are suggesting, the job creation. Unfortunately, some of the product we can't manufacture in South Africa, so we have to import coil, but everything else is pressed, manufactured. The tooling is done here. We manufacture everything, and then we box and kit it and send it all around the world. So yeah, we're very proud of that. We've got offices in Ghana and in Kenya, and we've also got an office in the USA. So out of this little Pinetown office here in Durban, we send our products all over the world. And I think we're in a very privileged position where we are now. We also have an energy business, so both water and energy are highly needed at the moment. So I think, but in terms of what your question, Jeremy, I think we really are under pressure. You know, there's a lot going on in the country at the moment, and if we talk about metal, we talk about sort of our power issues that we have. I think it's just making everything a lot more expensive to produce and stay competitive in a global environment, and that's the struggle that we face. And you know, I think we certainly do. We certainly do ensure that we do as best we can. And I think skills is a big thing. I think we certainly need more skills in this environment, and we're always looking for good people in terms of coming into the business and actually helping us export the product around the world. So yeah, we as a long-standing member of Proudly South African, we're very happy, and it's worked for us, and it's been a good association with them. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question for you, Jeremy, but
Chester, it certainly does. Thank you, and I will get back to you. And I can also tell you that if I need a tank of that size, the one that you're sitting in front of, you're the first person that I'm going to come to.
That's a small one, Jeremy. We go up to 4.5 million liters. So that's very small, but we do work in the different sectors in government. So we'll get into that later. Yeah.
So I'm going to combine a question from Roy Harrington to all of you, and one that I have as well. Roy correctly identifies, and Roy, thank you for your question. You were first out the blocks. Roy says you have to do a cost-benefit analysis before pursuing local buy. He goes on to say normally imported products from China are less expensive than local products because of volume production. I don't think there would be any disagreement as far as that is concerned. My question to the panel members, and Rene, I'm going to come to you first then. How do we make the manufacturing sector more competitive on a global scale when we are dealing constantly with price threats from beyond our borders? Rene, you pick it up first.
Yeah, I think there's a range of issues, and it's a very valid point, of course. The DTIC has within its mandate a range of trade and industrial policies which typically look to support local manufacturing. So I do think in the short term, we should look to duplicate where some of those trade relationships, industrial policies have worked. The auto sector is a really good example of one of those, where, relatively speaking, if you consider where South Africa is positioned in terms of, let's call it positioning close to or relative to global markets, the fact that we kind of, the southern tip of the African continent, yet continue to produce vehicles that are competitive in global export markets. You think about companies like Mercedes-Benz and BMW, most of their production is for export purposes. And that's on the back of how the industrial policy known as APDP and its various iterations has been structured to make those products competitive on a global basis. So I think there's a very strong role for policy, and there's examples of where that works. If it can be scaled out into other manufacturing sectors, then I think that's probably a good starting point. Then we'll look at other kind of supporting mechanisms. Tapiwa has spoken a lot about the skills and some of the kind of human capital support. I'm not going to touch on that. But if you look at other infrastructural support, like the various SEZs and location hubs that we have around the country, I think manufacturing companies would do well to investigate the benefits of being located in one of those spaces. I do think there's a lot that can be done in terms of infrastructure support, making our logistics platforms and networks even stronger. I think the opportunity for logistics growth into the African continent is a really kind of a big space where we should be positioning South Africa to be a driver and first mover in developing some or unlocking some of those benefits that comes with logistics enhancements. Of course, as South Africans, I think we've discussed really significant the role that Eskom and stable energy supply plays. The quicker we move into the diverse sources of energy supply, stabilizing the grid, I think that's going to be one of the main support factors for supporting manufacturing. And all of that on its own should provide a basic level of support to kind of, I don't want to use the word protect, but make South African product and localization competitive relative to some of the, let's call it import penetration. I do want to close this particular comment on a really important aspect, and that is we've always got to be looking at future markets. And at least in the auto sector, the emergence of what we call the NEV or new energy vehicle space, trying to position ourselves as a hub of production for new future markets, not just focused on existing production. All involved in the manufacturing, let's call it space or stakeholder value chain space, need to always be thinking about future markets. And I think I'll stop there and maybe pass on to some of my fellow panelists.
Thank you very much, Rene. I think those are very insightful comments. And Susan, to sum up Rene's points very badly here, two thrusts. One is perhaps friendlier, more enabling policy. The other is improvements in logistics. What do you believe from a DTIC perspective can be done to enable better competition, which will obviously then have an impact on price?
Thanks, Jeremy. I think to Rene's point, he touched on a couple of policy initiatives. from the DTI's point, we do have various master plans. I think the one that is widely and also it's being effective is the auto master plan. We also have the forestry master plan. We have the steel master plan. So through these master plans, Jeremy, what we're looking at is that each and every sector, it requires its own sort of, they require to get together firstly to identify challenges, and then the response will be sector-based. So that way, I think we've seen with the auto sector that it is working. So hence we're rolling out the master plans. But also I think the other key thing, Jeremy, with regard to the issue of the logistics, Renee touched on the importance of being located either in a special economic zone or an industrial park. So that also assists manufacturers to relieve them a pressure of certain things, because obviously, if you are an exporting manufacturer, you are located in a special economic zone, you can easily export your goods very, very efficiently without having other challenges. And then also from the DTIC's point, we do offer support for critical infrastructure, especially we do have companies that are located in areas where there are no roads and electricity. So we then support them with the critical infrastructure to make sure that they don't suffer to transport their goods in and around the country. Then the other one, Jeremy, is that is key in terms of the world changing and the innovation. Renee touched on the electric vehicle. For South Africa, the electric vehicle provides us with an opportunity to say we have minerals. With these minerals, besides us having the first electric car, we are able to bring in, to process some of the product locally. But those products include the batteries, include some of the items that are required, that can still be used for energy efficiency, that can still be used for other sectors. But one critical thing is that I think the key element that Tapiwa touched on is the skills. As the world is changing, most of the manufacturers, we find that there are new technologies, there are new skills that we need to get into South Africa to be able to make the manufacturing industry competitive. Because I guess the question is that in this changing world, with all these challenges, how do we then make them competitive? As the DTIC, we implement the master plans policies. We also provide financial support to be able to assist the local manufacturers to compete with the world. Thanks, Jeremy.
Susan, thank you very much indeed. Tapiwa and Chester, I do want to get your thoughts on how you stay competitive, and Chester, particularly as someone who's at the coalface, who's actually running the business here. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts. But Anna Majavu, I do also recognize your question. She's from VuTV Business News, and I want our panel members to reflect on her question, which I think is a very good one, about how small enterprises can break into the manufacturing sector, but perhaps even more importantly, colleagues, is there room for micro enterprises? A lot of this conversation that we're having so far is perhaps directed at and is concerning bigger enterprises. I'm very interested to know how micro enterprises can break into the manufacturing space, because if you think, for instance, Chester, that you've got problems, I would imagine that someone who's running a micro enterprise has got double the problems that you've got. So apply your minds to that, and it's a very good question, and it's in fact one that I had written down on my list as well. But Tapiwa, share some thoughts for us on enhancing competitiveness, because we've seen the rankings around the world, and South Africa unfortunately has slipped down the world competitiveness rankings. How do we improve that? Because by improving competitiveness, it's going to benefit the manufacturing sector wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Jeremy. What we and I think on competitiveness, you can probably put a word before that: global competitiveness. So in the space that we are, you have to understand that, like I said, 50% of our business is in the auto sector. A vehicle made anywhere in the world has to be the same or 100% with a vehicle that is made in South Africa. So it means the skills and the services that are supplied into that assembly plant have to match any other place in the world. So one of the things that we do when we are training, we make sure that we are training a person who can walk into any plant in the world and be functional. So our training has to be globally competitive. Our systems, even in the micro enterprises that we are talking about, it has to be globally competitive. So what we are doing, if I can give an example of our competitiveness program, we have got partners from Aachen University, WBA Academy. It's one of the best tooling consultancies, if not the best in the world. So when we come to Jeremy PTY, we are comparing with a database of the best in the world. And our focus is for you to match the best in the world. How do we measure global competitiveness? The simple measure is on exports. Are you able to export outside your zone across the world? We have got companies, our members in the tool iron mold in South Africa, who export 80-90% of their products around the world into high value markets. So whilst we can say our overall ranking has gone down, we have got serious niches of competitiveness in the country that are doing so well. And we could actually learn from them and broaden
and
that.
Tapiwa, I'm going to interrupt you rudely, and I'm going to ask you, that is such a good example. How are they doing that? What protocols and practices are they imparting within their organization that enables them to be globally competitive and to have an export advantage?
Quality. There's no negotiation on quality. There is no negotiation on delivery times. If a plant actually stops because of you, you're actually charged and eventually kicked out. So quality is key. Timeless delivery is key. And what they would actually say, let's say you're exporting to Germany, and then you say to them, oh, sorry, we're on stage 6, we're on stage 6 load shedding. They'll say, no, sort out your problems. So we have got companies—
Not their problem, yeah.
Yes, they'll just say, sort out your problem. So we have got companies in our members who have actually gone off the grid because they want to keep their global markets. So they don't feed on excuses. You have to deliver. Find ways of making sure that you deliver on time and the quality. There's no issues about that. And make sure you've got the right people, which is why we are ensuring that we are training people of global quality to go into our members to support the industries that we support. And key of that is automotive.
Right. Tapiwa, thank you very much indeed. Chester, I'm assuming that you agree with everything that Tapiwa has raised. The one thing that I do like is no excuses, and it's about developing a thick skin and having resilience. And I'm assuming that that applies directly to you as a business owner. You've got to solve your own problems in order to stay competitive and to be and to achieve success then with local manufacturing.
Yeah, 100%, Jeremy. And I think just to go to your earlier point, I mean, we purchase everything locally that we can possibly purchase. So that's the first thing we do. On the SME micro enterprise, by example, our nuts and bolts, we actually get them made in Transvaal, the old Transvaal, and we only buy them from there because they're specifically made for us, which we buy them in the hundreds of thousands. So by example, there's one item that we would purchase from somebody that could manufacture a nut and a bolt, by example, that we would make. So that kind of talks to that. And I think the idea is that we would support locally, and more so we would support Pinetown-based businesses and Durban-based businesses, and so we would sort of go out from there. But
how do you drive, Chester, if I can interrupt, how do you drive the quality quotient that you need from your suppliers? How much pressure do you put on them?
No, a major amount of pressure, because I think, as Tapiwa was saying now, in a global economy, you've got to be cost is becoming an issue. I think we all understand that. We talk about power, the rand, we talk about competitiveness, and that's becoming a challenge. But effectively, the two things you can actually keep control of is obviously quality is number one. So, I mean, we've got an office in the US, and if we send a 40-foot container there and we're missing 3 items, it's a major issue. And then you get onto site, and then it's not up to spec of the local. So that's one issue. So that box is a big tick. And then obviously time to delivery is a big thing too. So those two things. So if you look at that sort of triangular quotient, we're trying to mold between all of them in order to stay competitive. And the only other way we can do that, because we believe in also skilling up people, and this is whole nother topic, but in terms of, we feel like we've got a employment problem and not an unemployment problem, because the skill level has kind of disappeared. So, we often have positions available for months on end for the right skills. So, everybody wants to study and go overseas or whatever they want to do, but there's actually a trade, and maybe that's where Tapio is going to agree with me. We have a shortage in trade, and that's where we kind of come into our own, and we do a lot of skill transaction and train people up, and that's how we stay competitive. And if people need to leave and go into other markets, that's okay. But that's one of the things that we do. And then lots of product, and that's talking to the automotive industry. You need just product lines running all the time and keeping busy. So I don't know if that gives you a bit of insight into that, Jeremy.
It gives me an insight, Chester, and all I can say is rather you than me, my friend, because I think you're in a very difficult situation. To everybody that's part of this webinar today, one of the things which is, and it's not the first time I've done this, one of the things which I find so gratifying is that participants in the webinar are offering solutions the whole time. I don't have time to go through every single thing in the Q&A or the chat room, but Cedric Lottering, I do recognize your contribution. He's from an organization called Lean and Green Manufacturing, an associate of Productivity South Africa. He's got some thoughts on the on how people can become more productive. He's got something called the Kaizen, I hope I pronounced that right, the Kaizen program, where SMEs can access up to 170,000 rands worth of consultation fees for free. Cedric, I'm going to leave it there. If people want more details, Lean and Green Manufacturing, you can make the connection yourself. But thank you very much indeed for helping people, because I'm also assuming that competitiveness within local manufacturing also comes down to collegiality and people helping themselves. Now let's get to that very excellent question from Anna Majavu from TV Business News. And I want to focus specifically on micro enterprises. Renee, come back to you. Is there space in this paradigm that we're talking about for micro enterprises, given that it's going to be so much more difficult for them to break into this market? What help can you give in that respect?
So I think we must be honest about the question. Micro enterprises, particularly into a global value chain like the automotive sector, is probably a little more difficult than you would find in the general manufacturing space. And part of the reason is exactly kind of what earlier, in that especially if you are producing for OEM production vehicles, especially with the level of safety critical components and systems that go into it, it's typically dominated by multinational supplier companies and their sub-suppliers. So from a micro perspective, I do think it's a little harder than other sectors. Having said that, the focus on what we in the sector call deep localization. If you think about autos manufacturing as a pyramid, you've typically got the OEMs or the vehicle assemblies right on the top, and then they've got a tiered structure of suppliers. What we call tier 1, then tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 material suppliers. I do believe the opportunity comes in for micro enterprises the greater we get, A, more volumes of vehicles being assembled in South Africa. That on its own translates to greater localization, and then specific policies and programs that unlock localization lower down in those tiers that I was referring to. In the auto sector, there's a really good example of transformation linked to deep localization, where you've got something set up for the autos industry transformation fund, where the OEMs, and we're about to take a batch of multinational tier ones into that structure, where there's guaranteed procurement opportunities for Black-owned businesses, typically lower size businesses. I do think if that model is expanded in autos manufacturing particularly, then we do open up some opportunities for smaller enterprises. I suppose support for micro startup type structures, there's a range of government and public-private type supporting measures. From my own organization's perspective, we spend a lot of time on information sharing, assisting some of the smaller manufacturers with the kind of program. Someone was talking about Kaizen. That's a really good example. One of the things that we do promote in terms of competitiveness, shop floor improvement. Those are the kind of programs that I think smaller enterprises need to always be focused on, always making use of, always engaging on. There's a myriad of support out there for smaller enterprises. And I do think that's probably going to be the kind of space that some of these organizations need to be looking at.
And Susan, I'm going to get to you in just a moment about how micro enterprises can break into this whole value chain. But Rene, what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the opportunity for micro or small enterprises do exist. But before you can even think about diving into the pond with the big fish, you've got to have all your processes and protocols right. You've got to make sure that you are running an efficient organization which is able to feed in seamlessly into the bigger supply chain. If you haven't got those basics right, you're on a hiding to nothing.
Absolutely. I think you've summarized it really well.
So Susan, let's bring you in again, looking at micro enterprises. Are they sometimes just lost in the churn, or what? How can they be helped?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I think what is actually critical is that it's through the small and micro enterprise that we can resolve the issue of unemployment. So from the DTIC and its financing group, we've moved away from the size of the company to how much do you require in terms of the support. So over the years, so we've been able to support a lot of micro businesses, a lot of startups, especially once you identify an opportunity of saying, I want to manufacture this particular product, because the main key is to get them into the value chain of the bigger businesses. And how we get them there is to provide them with the machinery and equipment to help them with the quality. But also what is key in terms of assisting them, we've got the program Export Marketing and Investment Assistance. We're taking a lot of small businesses outside the country to be able to sell their product globally, because remember, after providing them with that financial support to produce their program, they need to be able to export. So through this program, we take them out, and they can also initiate the market to say, for instance, I've got this particular product, I want to market it in Botswana, Namibia, or in Europe. We offer that support. We also offer them support to participate in bigger sort of markets where they are able to showcase their program. So in that way, we're building them to be confident to say, over and above the financing support that you got for machinery and equipment, you need to get market access. And then again, also, Jeremy, there's a need for the post-investment support, because a lot of micro businesses, if you leave them and then you just give them financial support and then hoping that there's a lot of things that they will get things right, they just get lost in the value chain. So hence, through the post-investment support by our institution, we're able to identify some of the problems that they are actually encountering. Thanks, Jeremy.
Susan, thank you very much indeed. Been talking. I've also been paying a close attention to the Q&A section. I'm just wondering if our proudly South African organizers of the webinar can maybe provide a lot of what I'm trying to say is a lot of the questions are coming about difficulty in accessing funding. I'm sure, Susan, it's not the first time that you've heard issues like this. I don't have time to go through every single person and every single industry and say, you know, how do they access funding? Susan, maybe you can provide to the Proudly South African team a better way of getting in touch with the department so that all of these requests can be dealt with timeously. But there are a lot of questions coming through on funding. To all of our delegates who are attending the webinar today, I recognize them, I understand, and funding is germane. It is critical to this entire process. I feel your frustration. Susan's made it very clear that the DTIC is there. They have the programs. They do want to help. The grants, the funding is available. If we can just find a way of making sure that there is a seamless connection between your department and some of the panel members, things will be a whole lot easier. Perhaps we can email addresses out or numbers out just to make sure that we get that side of things right. Let me come back to Tapiwa very quickly. We were talking of micro enterprises at Tapiwa, often something which is ignored in all of this churn. What would your recommendation be in that respect? How do they break into this process?
I think that's an easy question for me, because the nature of the companies that we deal with in the tool, die and mold, and special machining sector are actually small companies, usually owned by a tool maker, which means skill is at the core or is at the center of micro enterprises in our sector. So they are driven. So Jeremy PTY in the TDM sector will have Jeremy as a tool maker. So part of what we are doing, which is why we are very keen on, why we prioritize development of skills. Our first graduates in the next 3 years will have spent about 10 years in industry. You will start seeing small companies that are owned by our graduates supplying the OEMs, as Renee has said. So skill is actually at the core of it. You need to develop the competence that will link you to a global value chain. We always have this talk that it's small companies, SMMEs, that create jobs. Stranded SMMEs that are not connected to any viable global value chain are just destined to fail. So the SMMEs that are key are ones that are connected to a viable global value chain. And that's one example that we actually see in the auto sector. So part of that is developing the skills, the people who actually understand the business, spend their time in the business. Funding, that people talk about lack of funding. When people are funding a project, they fund the owner. The idea is good, but if you come to me, Jeremy, and you want to be supported to join the automotive value chain, I'll just ask, are you looking for cameras or whatever? So the issue is we fund the owner. So it's what is key. And if you look into all countries that have actually broken through, go into your China, go into your Germany, the people that are actually leading macro enterprises or SMMEs, and SMMEs, we are looking at the number. It's not about value. These are high value. They're small in number, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, but they generate millions of rands, and in some instances, billions of rands in terms of value. And part of it is these are people who are highly skilled. So part of the question that Majavu has asked is, let's look in our area, look at the skill. Can we look at the skill? And that's part of what we are doing as PTSA. We are there to develop your skill, especially to go into the manufacturing sector. Yes, there will be low value where you can break through, let's say with 200,000, 300,000, where you're making plastic cups, plastic buckets for domestic use, where the level of precision required is low. That you can go in. but still you need the sort of skills back up that make you understand the business. And that is key. Without that, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, you're gone if you're not connected to something that is valuable.
Tapiwa, I think that makes perfect sense, and thank you very much indeed. Chester, you did reference micro enterprises, so I'm going to change tack slightly and move on to something else, which is always difficult when it comes to manufacturing, and that's the whole notion of optics. How do you convince? Again, it's a question that all of you can have a stab at, but let me come to Chester first of all. How do you convince people that locally manufactured goods are of a comparable or a better quality than stuff that is imported? Often people will look at locally manufactured items and there will be a degree of suspicion. I'm sure you will concur. Part of it is making sure that people buy into the concept of localization, but they have to understand that there is value for money in that respect.
So I think, Jeremy, looking and feeling and touching is what makes the product what it is. And I think it takes a lot of convincing. I know in the early days, 25 years ago, when the business was started, with our founding members, it was very difficult to, and this is like revolutionizing concrete reservoirs into steel structures that are modular, that you'd put up in 14 days, you've got 3 million liters. So it became a mindset change, and then it becomes a lot easier. It's like anything. Once they look, they see, they touch, they look at quality, and that was one thing that we have never backed down on. I mean, I think the biggest challenge once we won out South Africa in terms of the ability to be able to adopt this technology was then trying to convince the neighboring countries, Africa, New Caledonia, the Asian islands, and America, that this product can work. And that's where, again, we used a lot of sort of technological expertise, a lot of engineering, conforming to all sorts of different associations, and ability to be able to jump through the hoops to be able to make it happen. I mean, in South Africa, we have the skill, we have the engineering capability, and have done for many, many years. And we are leaders in what we do. I mean, we've just commissioned a seismic rated exercise through the University of Stellenbosch, which is the first in the world, which effectively looks at liquids and how they react in terms of, which obviously talks to our US market and partly South Africa, but that's the first rewriting stuff in the world. So I think it's a look-see thing, it's a quality, and that's kind of that's where we've had our wins in terms of the sort of global economy, and we believe that South Africa can produce, like the panelists sitting here, can produce excellent stuff. We are under pressure based on some of the stuff, but yeah, that's where we are at the moment.
And my question to you, Chester, is how do you convince the naysayers? How do you tell people to overcome their skepticism?
Well, I think, yeah, for me, I mean, it's really it's one-on-one. It's having that backup with the guys, with the various companies. I mean, you know, we're talking about people like Anglo, DRA, you know, these are the guys we're dealing with. So it talks also to our ISO standards. So we look at the 45,000, the 9001. We prescribe to all these international standards. And I think that's what separates various companies. And I don't know if that answers your question, Jeremy, but
it does. What I'm hearing from you, Chester, is that often it's a long road to hoe, and that you've got to be on your game all the time. Is that the moment standards slip, people will nail you, and you've just got to make sure that you're on top of it all the time. Rene Mutial from NARCAM, what's your response to that? How do you overcome anti-local manufacturer bias?
So I think the important thing, especially from our perspective, is that the push for localization has been accepted as imperative for the sector. It's not it's not so much an anti-localization bias, but rather one that says we want to localize, but in order for greater localization, there's the following kind of basic parameters or steps that need to be in place. So I think the short answer is ensure at all times that whatever it is from your own shop floor manufacturing perspective, you are able to show the commitment and the intent to be at those levels required for participation in the value chain. I don't believe there's an anti-localization bias. And again, I speak specifically to the automotive production environment. It's more about ensuring that the long-term hard yards are being taken to ensure that smaller companies can integrate themselves into the value chain.
And Susan, I would imagine when you're looking at prospective organizations that have come to you for funding, you're going to look for that commitment. To Rene's point, you're going to make sure that they have not only done the hard yards, but they are a viable, committed, and sustainable business. And that's the lesson, I imagine, for any organization that is wanting to accelerate or amplify their local manufacturing capability.
Yeah, apologies, I was struggling with the unmute button. Jeremy, you touched on something very critical. And I think when we provide support, we want to keep the local manufacturers sustainable. Part of keeping them sustainable is to make sure that they meet the quality standards, the global quality standards. They also are able to attract the buyers. So I think what Chester touched on is that in South Africa we've got the capability of producing high quality products, and I think we've seen it with a lot of products that we are taking globally when we market those products to say they can actually compete globally. So when they come home, we need initiatives like Proudly SA, because obviously they need to attract the market locally to be able to showcase the case studies of the South African businesses that are actually producing high quality products. Because in some of the stories, Jeremy, I think there are some of the products that are being sold more globally, but at home they don't have the market. And most of the time, those are the balance that you're creating to say this particular product is very popular in Europe, in Australia, but here at home, we see it as an inferior product. So I think the initiatives of like creating awareness with the manufacturers to say, this is the process we followed, we're meeting all the qualities. Then also to just make sure that in our shop space, in our shelf space, we showcase the South African products that are being sold. So this type of initiative will help us, because as we take the companies globally and as we encourage them to export, there are those ones that need to get the market at home to keep them sustainable. Thanks, Jeremy.
Susan, thank you very much indeed. Tapiwa, I'm going to, again, if you want to address that whole issue of local manufacturer bias, if it exists, I would imagine it does in pockets. I would appreciate an answer to that. But I'm also going to raise another issue if I can. And in this very difficult economic environment that we're working in right now, and all of you in one way or another have reflected on it, whether it be power cuts and blackouts, whether it be water shortages. Here in Johannesburg, we're facing a 56-hour water shortage in various suburbs, starting, I think, at 7 o'clock this evening. I want to know how local manufacturers need to develop a strategy for uncertainty, and what you're thinking is in terms of that. In fact, it comes down to risk management. Is that how has your thinking changed in that respect? So that's my next line of questioning. But to people, if you'll start with that, but if you want to reflect very quickly on the local bias, please feel free to do so. But I think our other panel members have already dealt with that in some detail. And Tapiwa, if you'll just unmute yourself, phrase of the year, unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. I think one thing that we also need to really get an understanding of is that buying local, consuming local is actually a culture. I heard the first time, our first question was actually dealing with issues of price. Price can always be managed. The first thing is actually a culture that gives local companies or local capability an opportunity. I'll give you an example of what happened during COVID. We talked about one of the OEMs was affected locally. They could not bring in people from outside. They could not bring in people from outside the world, specifically South Korea, to work in one of the plants here. They came to one of our members to do some work for them that included making robots, programming them. It's something that the local company had never done before. But they did an excellent job. So the capability was there, the opportunity was never there. So the issue of buying local, whether we are talking about government, I mean, I used to work in the DTI, and we have got there is a program in the DTI called designation. I worked in the teams that actually designated some of the very first products that went into that. We would actually go into there and identify what is it that makes us less competitive in terms of price, in terms of delivery, and in terms of quality. And in some instances, we'd actually pick up that, oh, okay, we are 30% more expensive than China. What? And then you unpack that 30%. What is it that makes us 30% more expensive than China? And you target those. Will probably in the end be 7%. But if you are dealing with a product that is connected, linked to other sectors of the economy, you take a hit on the 7%, but you actually uplift other areas of the economy. So it's a culture, and it's actually something that needs all countries working together. I remember one time, I mean, when I was in the DTI, talking to some Swedish guys about buying South Africa. The guy just patted me on the back and says, "Tapiwa, thanks for your effort. We buy from our own." It's not in any legislation. It's not legislated, but it's in their head that they know that we are going to buy from our own. And it's a culture that we need to have, that we are going to buy from our own, and we will hold our own accountable to be able to supply quality on time and to the quantities that we want, and to make sure that they've got a setup that our or my factory is not a risk because I've chosen to do business with Jeremy. That culture has to be built. And all the, and all the investments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you make a lot of sense as far as that's concerned, folks. Again, I've always got a weather eye on the time here. Rene Mutilal from NARCAM, strategies for uncertainty in these very, very difficult times that businesses have to operate in. Give us some good advice here.
I think that's at the heart of kind of all business planning requirements. Autos companies, particularly, like I mentioned earlier, when we adopt strategic outlooks here in South Africa, it's typically aligned to where global markets are going, global innovation. I think we touched on it earlier, the real opportunities that exist in inserting ourselves into the kind of product mixes that we're starting to see unearth themselves in global vehicle markets, really important. So I think strategically in an auto sector context, it tends to link particularly product quality, future outlook, and whether you're a small business, big business, I think if you are able to continuously ensure that you're positioned to match where the market is going, that's always going to be a key tenet of your strategy.
Also, Rene, I imagine having a better appreciation of, to use the old cliche, the kind of the black swan events, which seem to come at us with greater and greater rapidity these days.
Absolutely. And I think, again, you talk about it as blacklisting statistic, is one of the most commonly known black swan events that we've had to deal with as a country, and I think as across the world, has been the COVID-19 pandemic. What we found is that emerging out of COVID-19, there was a lot of investigation and interest in moving production, localization into South Africa in autos value chains, particularly from the perspective of managing what became global supply chain crisis. I mean, everyone has heard about this issue around the chips and the shortage of those that has resulted in vehicle assembly losses. I think many companies are looking to see how do you onshore what has typically been imported into South Africa, and in doing so, continue to provide the level of production that prevents the kind of volume losses that we've seen. So ultimately, black swan events should be seen as opportunities. Component manufacturers, two things happened out of COVID. Number one, we started to see more component manufacturers enter into, let's call it, allied type manufacturing. Many of the NARCAM members were involved in government and even private initiatives around ventilator and medical device production at the time. But also some of our large exporting companies were able to fulfill markets that traditionally they had not had, because they were providing, let's call it, a backup export service into some of the global markets. What we saw is that components out of South Africa were at record export levels in the 2 years coming out of COVID-19. So I think your point on black swan events really important, and building that into some sort of strategic outlook is, Jeremy, you're right, really key.
Thank you, Rene. Susan Mankhole, back to you from the DTIC. What advice then do you give to businesses in managing and mitigating risk when they speak to you, particularly when they're coming saying, well, you know, help fund us. We want one of your grants.
Thanks, Jeremy. I think one of the key things coming from COVID is for companies to future-proof their businesses. Now we are seeing artificial intelligence, what is actually bringing. Technology is changing on a daily basis. So the question is that, what opportunities is it bringing, besides the fact that we're saying artificial intelligence is going to disrupt business? Yes, it will disrupt businesses. But then how do we then use technology to make sure that we keep our company? How do we work hand in hand with artificial intelligence to identify alternative opportunities to what manufacturers has got? So I think those are the key things. And again, also, from what Rene touched on, COVID has shown us that we can actually adjust. A lot of companies adjusted their production line to say, instead of us having to work in the premises, we have to accommodate to also work remotely, but also in terms of alternative products. So we are manufacturing this. There are these opportunities that COVID has brought, or that technology is bringing. How do we then expand our businesses in doing that? Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Susan. And I was waiting for someone to raise the whole issue of manufacturing and artificial intelligence. And I think that's an entirely different webinar, because things are moving so quickly there. But unless you have an absolute grasp of the power and also the ethics of artificial intelligence, you're on a hiding to nothing here. But thank you very much for that. And maybe the Proudly South African team can take that on board, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to have a real conversation about the power of artificial intelligence in manufacturing, because it's a very, very interesting space. But Chester Foster, back to you from SBS Tanks. Again, these strategies for uncertainty and the way in which you've had to recalibrate your thinking, because the reality is you just don't know what's coming down the path at you these days.
Yeah, Jeremy, we don't. And I think COVID was a big shock to everybody. I mean, everyone was scrambling for laptops and software, and it became the new norm. And yeah, I'm busy doing it. I'm actually doing a dissertation on that at the moment. And the point is that for us, it was product diversification was the first thing that we looked at. Don't put your eggs in one basket. That was the first thing that we immediately after COVID looked for other products that we could add to our range. And globalization and diversification of people. What saved us in COVID was we actually had people in country on the ground that we could send those containers to. And that was actually the key, where we had our own members and people that we had distribution around the world. So in that time, over that 18-month period, we could still send containers from Pinetown, managing, as you can imagine, office staff and people in factory, and the welders couldn't go across to the design department and all that kind of thing. I think we all experienced this. But the saving grace was the fact that we could still send containers out of South Africa, and they could land in Kenya or in USA, and they could still be installed. So we've taken it a couple more, and future thinking is kind of going to be where we see it. AI is a challenge. We've mentioned it. Automation, which obviously reduces jobs. We have a whole lot of people that we need to employ. So yeah, that's going to be the challenge. We can't solve that, but we can certainly employ people one at a time and increase our. So logistics was a big thing in that time, and we continue to look at our business and how can we actually diversify that, because we are in a global economy now, and we must see ourselves as that. And again, how do we reach markets where Proudly South Africa and the government can help us reach those markets? And that for us, yeah. So not keeping all your eggs in one basket is a short way of kind of saying that. And how do we look to other products outside of just water? So that's the ventures that we're busy on at the moment.
Chester, thank you very much indeed, and I think that's important and very, very insightful. Tapiwa, before I come to you, just for you to share some thoughts on kind of dealing with risk in all of this, as we bring this to an end, because I need to bring this to an end at around 10:45 today. I want all four of the panel members just to think very briefly about 2 or 3 new rules in manufacturing that are going to help our participants. New systems, new strategies, new thinking that they can apply that can help them, because you're all experts in one way or another in your particular field. So share some of that expertise with us. So if I can just ask you to start applying your mind to that. And Rene, I'm going to come to you first, and I will take those kind of new rules or those new ways of thinking as your closing remarks as well. But Tapiwa, dealing with risk, what's your thinking? What's your view?
Thank you, Jeremy. I think with regards to our area, dealing with risk and also uncertainty, the issue of power for us actually hit us very hard, especially for our members that are dealing with plastics. Imagine you've got molten plastic in the system and power goes. And we also deal with processes that are of high precision, that just even, not even a power cut, but a drop in voltage just for a second or a millisecond can actually affect the whole process, and you have to start all over again.
Wow.
So for us, that's the, yeah. So for us, the issues around power have been key. Some of our members have invested in getting off the grid, which is undesirable, and which also to a large extent is not incentivized. Maybe we need to have a conversation with Susan to say, can we incentivize?
Also very expensive, isn't it?
Yes, going off grid. But that's something key. But I think if we want to be a manufacturing country, if we've got a shortage of something, is it possible that we make sure that it is available for manufacturers? Just like we also say where it has to be available for health facilities and other things. So if you've got a shortage of power, a shortage of water, is it okay for me in my house to not have water for 2 days, but the factory next door actually keeps running, keeps a contract, and keeps people in jobs? It's something that we need to have a conversation around. But one of the risks, Jeremy, I think, and then I think in South Africa, we need to deal with this. We need to deal with the sort of risk that we are creating for ourselves. 2 days ago, I think 2 days ago, yesterday, the N3 was closed because trucks were touched. And that's a
trucks,
major, yes, that's a major artery of South Africa. So I have had a power cut for the past week. I'm now trying to move my goods and the N3 is closed. Following day, the N4 is closed. So it's those sort of things that we need really to manage. We need to create industrial stability and make sure we manage the strikes. Yes, every day in South Africa, somebody is on strike on something, disrupting manufacturing, disrupting processes. We need to have a better way of managing those risks. And some of those risks that our partners actually look at. Just in a minute, we've got a company that is one of our members that manufactures seats for aeroplanes, right? It's 100% imported, exported, because we don't assemble seats in South Africa. But one of the things that they're always flagging is the industrial instability, besides the issues of power. So it's those things that we need to manage. If we want to let's find better ways of managing our conflicts and managing our differences, that it does not affect the shop floor. Thanks.
I think that is such good advice. And no business likes uncertainty. Give them a predictable, stable operating environment, and it will enhance the ability to successfully manufacture. And that goes to the heart of it. Colleagues, we're drawing to an end here. So, Rene, those are 2 or 3 thought sparks, new rules, call them what you want. Leave us with 2 pearls of wisdom.
Yeah, I think definitely for me, probably the most important and key is that manufacturing as we know it is not, it's not kind of what we've always thought about in terms of a typical manufacturing plant-based. We like to think of it as extremely strong kind of big plants, lots of employment and all of that. I think that has changed. We even see it even in a very big manufacturing sector like the automotive sector. So positioning in terms of where 4IR type production is becoming increasingly relevant, the role of data, being able to understand data, some of the new manufacturing processes and techniques, the role of 3D printing. I think for me, that's probably the biggest thing that manufacturers in South Africa need to be thinking about. How do they insert themselves into the 4IR type thinking around around manufacturing and being able to position themselves? And I think the other important point for manufacturing is it's no longer something that you can think of in terms of doing it alone. The role of partnerships, setting up the kind of global linkages, technology partnerships, use of clustering, even at the most local level. Those have got to be at the forefront of driving your strategy going forward. And yet, yeah, even though clustering has been around and we know about it, it's typically been around manufacturing processes. For me, where we need to be going in terms of some of those cooperation and clustering type thinking is around innovation, and what do we as South African manufacturing companies bring to the innovation discussion. So I think I'll stop.
You cannot for one moment discount the power of collaboration and collegiality. Rene Muthial, thank you very much indeed, from the National Association of Automotive Component and Allied Manufacturers. I really do appreciate your time, and thank you so much for the valuable insights. Susan Mankole from the DTIC, very quickly, a couple of inspirational closing remarks from you.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. I think what is key to manufacturers and coming to the two things is that sustainability, and I think the issue of the whole decarbonization, especially those ones that are exporting, you now need to start looking now to say, because most of the countries are changing. Am I going to be able to export past the rules of the sustainability? And I guess the other thing is the innovation. Government support is available and government funding is available. It's available mainly to keep the South African businesses operating, to also make sure that they expand to respond to the issue of unemployment. So where companies require support, I did put, I hope the chat is actually visible to everybody. You can access the DTI support via the website under the financial assistance. We also have the contact center that you can contact, because in most of the cases you find that companies that we funded, then they are getting into trouble. They only reach out after they're being liquidated. Do reach out to us as soon as possible. Then also the whole issue of artificial intelligence and technology. Let's grab this opportunity and make sure that we create new industries out of this, new skills and new technologies for South Africa. Thanks, Jeremy.
Susan Mangola, thank you very much indeed. Acting Deputy Director General Industrial Financing Branch at the DTIC. I really do appreciate those comments as well. Tapiwa, very quickly from you, one or two closing thoughts?
Thank you, Jeremy. I think I'll just add two things. My colleagues have talked about innovation and everything, but I think what is key for us is the speed. The speed of innovation is something else. What is correct and new today is old news next week. So our environments, and especially in our governments and everything, they have to acknowledge that things are moving at a particular speed. And for us in industry, we actually need that facilitation. A lot of times we are pulled back by legislation that is 1960s that does not, and we argue for new bills that take 5 years. By the time they're passed, they're already old. So I think the whole environment should be accommodative to the speed. Then the second thing is also, although countries are talking about, like say productivity, SA, buy South Africa, buy America, the world is actually opening up a bit. Not a bit, the world is opening up a lot. I can sit here in South Africa and do work for the whole world, sitting here in South Africa. My salary being banked in Mauritius and Africa. So things have actually opened up. And this is, so I can support hundreds of manufacturing entities across the world, sitting anywhere in the world. Then the last thing is that the world is also becoming open and discerning. With social media and everything, make sure that you are manufacturing responsibly, because what you do today will be looking at you in the face with the next headline. So make sure we are green, make sure we are responsible, make sure we are not doing any practices that actually can kill our markets. Because nowadays, I can go and sue you anywhere where your product goes in, and that kills your market. Thanks, Jeremy.
Tapiwa, thank you very much indeed, and spoken like a true millennial. Particularly when it comes to the borderless ways of commerce and doing business. Chester Foster from SBS Tanks, very quickly, last word to you, then I'll close the webinar.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think it's already been said. I mean, the collaboration for me was, Renee said it, I think between governments, global countries and local entities, that's going to be the key. That's what moves things forward for me. And also planning for the uncertainty. I think I'm not putting doom or the black swan, but something else is going to happen at some point, and you need to future-proof your business for that. And I think just to comment on the AI, I think there's an opportunity. This is moving faster than any of us sitting in this panel, and it's an opportunity for the youth to really absorb and get ahead and understand AI and what's going to happen. So big possibilities, and I think it's going to be, speaking to Renee and the automotive industry, I think it's going to be huge there, and obviously in IT. But yeah, we look forward to it, and thank you for the time, Jeremy.
To all the panel members, thank you very much indeed. On behalf of Proudly South African, it has been insightful. It's been useful, I know, to the participants, and most of all, it's been interesting. because people getting around a table and talking about things that they're passionate about is always fascinating. So on behalf of Proudly South African, thank you very much for watching, and I wish you a safe and a warm day today. Looking out the window, it's still pretty cold here in Johannesburg. Bye-bye, everyone, and thank you.
Thanks, colleagues.
Thank you.
We good to just come off now, right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of what is in the Q&A.
I was reading it while we were going. I think we've covered all of the main ones.
Okay, all right.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks very much.
We seem to have lost the facilitator. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Yusuf, and thanks for inviting us to this.
Eustace, just a question from me. Are you going to make this link available? Do you want to share it across? What's the distribution kind of?
In fact, we'll get the team to, because they do record it. So we'll get the team to share it with all of you, including those who had attended. It will be sent out with the post-event questionnaire and survey to all the delegates and to the panelists. So we'll definitely send that out. Yeah.
All right. And also just capture the Q&A so that we take time to look at it.
Oh yeah, because there was still quite a bit that was still not responded to. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks
for your time.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
We love season as well. Bye.
Bye.